first I'm going to introduce Ian Wilson. Just put your hands together for Ian, and he's going to say a few words on the project.
Hi everybody, nice to see you all, thanks for coming. My involvement in this project, as Karina said, Creative Ireland, which is a government-sponsored agency, has a fund which is specifically aimed at climate change projects. So they're looking for artist-led projects which are supposed to encourage people to make practical changes in how we live our lives. So it's a big order, tall order, big task. But I spoke to a few people, and because I have lived in Leitrim and Cork, I'm now living in Cavan in Arva. And, there's a lot of bog land in Cavan which just lies empty. Nobody does anything with it. And so some of the things that are happening in different parts of the country, there's been government money put into restoring boglands. And what we're trying to do here is a little pilot project, which is simply aimed at encouraging people who have some bogland and don't do anything with it, to think about doing something positive with it. And by positive, I mean, when you start to bring a bog back, as I'm sure you know this, when you start to bring a bog back to its original condition, then you bring back a lot of wildlife, flora and fauna, and also in terms of dealing with climate problems, it's a good source of sequestering carbon in the ground. So there are many positive aspects to thinking about restoring bogs. We don't have the money to actually find a piece of bog and restore it ourselves. All we're doing is trying to provide information that people can go ahead and think about doing that themselves, and we can provide guidance and all that kind of thing because we have a really good team. My involvement as a composer, I'm making recordings on different bits of bogland around Cavan. It's just because the sound that goes on in bogland is an indicator of the health of that piece of bogland. So in the summer, on a healthy bog, there's all sorts of different insects and birds. On a piece of bog which is not healthy, you get a different kind of sound. There's not as much variety, not as much wildlife. So some of the things I'm doing, I'm just trying to record. I'm making the recordings for myself, but I'm going to use those in the piece of music, which is going to be presented on Culture Night in September. I'm going to involve a couple of live musicians. I'm just gathering the recordings at the moment. Not quite sure how it'll turn out, but I'm hoping it'll be interesting, and it'll be running in parallel with the rest of the project. The main meat of these projects, of this project, is in these kind of meetings, and we're having visits to already restored bog, which are very educational for me as well as for people who have their own bogland. So I suppose what I wanted to do tonight, in terms of the own work I've been doing, is just to play you a couple of little snippets of recordings I've made. Are we able to do that, Andrew?
So I think what we'll do is we'll play Emily's video that has her sounds with it.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So this is a little video which was made by Emmeline, who's an ecologist, talking about bogland, and we just have the music underneath, or the sound underneath, is some of the recordings I've made recently, and what you'll hear is some bird song I made on the bog in T-Boy. It was quite a nice fresh day, lots of birds around, and then the recording you hear after that is of a little rill from a bog near Ballincollig. And I used what's called a hydrophone for that, which is a microphone that goes in the water. And after that, I got some special microphones. Again, on T-Boy, I was recording the sound of moss. I have this, it's called a contact mic, and you basically, you touch the moss with that mic. They're very sensitive, and they pick up the strangest little sounds. You wouldn't think moss has a sound, but when you get a microphone in there, it's actually making all sorts of strange little sounds. So those are the kind of sounds that you'll hear underneath the speech that Emmeline has here first. So this is Heather Bothwell, everybody. Thank you.
I'm from a town I'm from a town called Ballymena, County Antrim, and I would go on my Honda 50 down to the bogs of the Ban Valley, and some of you may have visited up there. It's Heaney country, and the poetry that was inspired by those bogs. So the bogs that I got to know on my Honda 50 a long time ago, they're gone. They were extracted. So I developed a love for bogs way back. So I'm only 30 years in County Cavan, a married woman in County Cavan, so I may be taken on board yet as a genuine Cavan person or a genuine farmer, but I'm not really a farmer. So, and you do have to be sort of brave to stick your head up above the parapet and say, yes, this word restoration matters to me. And I know that land, it all runs very deep with us. It's important to us, and it's part of our art, and the play, the field, although I think that may have been about violence, that play. And also there's been a history of gaining our land rights, but I'm not sure that gaining our land rights meant leaving nothing for our descendants. I think we have to look after our land sometimes in a different way and not be short-sighted. The things that were struggled for in the past to get the Wyndham Act and that kind of thing in 1913. So, Karina, you may move on. Thank you. So I only discovered this map recently. This is the Bodley map from 1609. So this was for the plantation of Ulster. And this is this barony, Tully Haw. And as you can see to the west, they weren't really quite sure what was there to the west. So once you get up past, so that the area in the middle is this part of the world, Templeport, and you can see the townlands even back in mapped in 1609. So you can see Corboy and Killig. No, it's not Killig. Well, Templeport, I think, is right in the middle. Templeport's right in the middle of that, and the townlands are marked. To the west, you can see the cartographer was really impressed by the mountains. So the mountains was what was worrying them up there. And there will be restoration up there in the mountains of West Cavan and Leitrim. What will happen in the lowlands, I don't know. What matters to people in the lowlands, we have to decide whether bog restoration matters to us down in the lowlands or not. So if we move on a little bit. So how we draw maps influence how we think. So these maps are obviously to do with dividing up land. They were divided, I suppose, with allocating land and things like that. And as we said from the beginning, land was really important to the Irish psyche. And of course, our history, our socio-economic history, has been one of conflict and trouble over land. So again, I'm sticking my head up and saying we have to think about what we do with land. We move on again, Karina. So this is a place that I haven't been in quite a while, actually. There's a bit of bog off the Marsh Road, and I'm simply putting that up to have a different picture from the last time I talked in Templeport. This, again, you can see the lines. These are the townlands, the same townlands probably as were marked in the Bodley map from way, way back. But you can, when you look at aerial photographs, it's the brown bits that are the bog. The green bits are grass. The brown bits of the bog. And that part of the world, as far as I know, there's sort of limestone areas, and then there's hollows in between. And the whole of our lowland areas around here are drumlin areas. So it's the interdrumlin bits that are the boggy bits. So we've got lots of little bits of bog all over the place. So move on. And when you go back to 1859, again, we were allocating, we were dividing up, and we were saying, so this is the same part of the world as the previous map. This is out the Marsh Road in the townland of Derrymony. And you can see where the arrows are. What is that? 54 acres of bog. And it was divided between these gentlemen. I don't know if you know, are they still there? Are the Gilronans there? And I don't know if they're still there anyway, but you can see. So they had houses and land, and then they had allocation of bog. So if you go on to the next one. So this is when you go on to Land Direct now, you can see how it's divided up, and characteristically of bogs, it's divided in strips. And those strips were representing what Karina was talking about, how you'd cook your food, warm your house, and keep yourself warm and dry. And that's why it was divided up in this kind of thing. If we go on to the next map, this is a different map. Different lines, different way of thinking about things. Now, Unfortunately, we don't have Francis Mackin to talk about hydrology, and I'm not going to try and explain hydrology maps. That's a whole different science. In fact, if you've got youngsters coming on, I would say being a hydrologist would be a really good trade for the future, because we're going to have to think about water levels, sea levels, how our rivers work in the future. I'd say hydrology would be a good topic to get in with. So this is exactly the same area as we've had the two previous slides, Derrymony, and this is groundwater recharge. And that's from the GSI, the Geological Survey of Ireland. This is how they would map it. So I suspect this isn't a soil map, it's groundwater recharge, how the soil above is influencing what's going on underneath. So exactly what it means, I won't pretend to know, but my point is that different maps illustrate different things about how we're using the land. And maybe we have to sort of move into different ways of looking about units of land and how we interact with each other in those units. And we move on. So, my values, well, as Karina explained, I'm slightly obsessed. Anything that flies or crawls is something I'm interested in. So this was a geopark bog day we had last year. It was great fun. And we had great success getting lots of dragonfly larvae. The one to the left is called a black dartler, only occurs on bogland. So the thing about bogs is they're awkward, awful places, they're wet, acid, horrible places, but the plants and the insects that live there are specialised and adapted to live there, which is why ecologists get very excited, because they only occur in bogs, which is why we have to think about, are our bogs in good health? Are we missing something? Do they need restoration? And because bogs are such unique habitats, we have to think about keeping them in good order, which is why the word restoration. And I know restoration has become political because the word law has been added to the end of it, so it's restoration law as well. But in reality, it's what we're leaving for the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation. These little people that we're all so fond of. Right, next slide, please. The other thing we were doing this is Fartenbog, we were doing an archaeological survey. So this gentleman, again, he's creating another map. This is his GPS connector. And we're looking for things in the bog, which tells us about our history. Bogs are great because stuff doesn't rot. So the famous things like the bog bodies, but they pulled out shoes and shawls and all kinds of amazing things. And so we can know about how people lived in the past. We'll move on to the next slide. And who we are. Where we came from, what kind of people we are. So I was out in St. Mogs Island on Saturday and it was lovely. So I'm all inspired now about St. Mogs. So I Googled this, and this apparently is King David playing his harp. And correct me if I'm wrong, Oliver, but this is St. Mogs Reliquary, am I? Yeah. And there's a bird on King David's harp. So in the past, the people that were living in this area they're Freyans, I'm not quite sure who created this, but this amazing flourishing of our culture and our art, and the information about those people is probably stored in our bogs. Great big, what would you call them, museums of information about how they lived in the past. We move on a wee bit. So, money, numbers and money and all that kind of stuff. But it is for real. How do we put numbers on maintaining good water quality? How do we put numbers on carbon dioxide, the warming of the earth? How do we allocate numbers and land usage to that? So things are changing. How we do accountancy is changing. This is why I've got this image of Natural Capital Ireland. That's an organisation that's developing a way of putting numbers and values on these things, because bogs are really important for our water quality. Bogs are really important for carbon. And the other thing is there's money coming in. This is the Peatlands Community Engagement Scheme. West Cavan Bogs got money from that. I know that Killyconny got money. But the important word in there is community. It ain't going to come to people that don't pull together. Again, because it's a hydrological unit. You can't just do it on your own. You can't just say, I'm protecting my wee bit of bog, because it's all one unit. You have to come together. Right. And this is the often quoted phrase that 1 hectare of 10 metre deep bog has 30 times more carbon than 1 hectare of rainforest, which doesn't mean go and cut down the rainforest, it doesn't matter. It's just because, I don't know if you're the child of the 1970s, rainforest was the big thing. Yes, there's loads of biodiversity in rainforest, but all this bog is holding a heck of a lot of carbon. If you dry it out, the carbon seeps out. That's the problem. If you cut drains in it, this carbon just comes up. Okay? And now this wouldn't match the science of Franson, the hydrology, but this is my understanding of what a raised bog is. So raised bogs are what we have down in the lowlands. They used to be lakes. Up in the mountains, off in Slieve Rushen, up above Swad, up towards Glan, we have what's called blanket bogs. They weren't necessarily lakes, but our bogs around here used to be lakes, and the raised dome, in my simple understanding, is just like a big dome of water. And when we start cutting drains in it, it changes its structure, it changes, and some bogs actually start to sag and sump away, and it changes the whole structure of it. So think of them as great big storages of water. I know you think of them great big lumps of turf, but they're actually, you know how soggy and heavy and wet wet sod is. Loads and loads of water. Right, next slide. But yeah, we'll go back to the important stuff, the biodiversity. Because as I was explaining to you, sadly we don't have Francis, but no doubt he'll be back, Francis back. He's been very generous to West Cavan bogs. When I first contacted him, I said, can you come and sort of look at some of the bogs down here? He said, yes, I can. And he was working for environmental firm in the north, and he didn't have to, but he's involved with working for Parks and Wildlife, that kind of thing. So he came down as part of his PhD studies and looked at our bogs. So my interest, as we've said, is about the biodiversity, and there's so many different kind of things. This fella, something wrong with our recording of lizards in West Cavan. This one down to the right is Farton, where I've recorded. The one in the middle is actually in Fermanagh, that square, and then the rest are way up above Dowra. So there's no lizards in between. Is there no lizards in between? So we're not valuing what we have. We're not putting the records in. They're amazing things. This is a pregnant female. She doesn't lay eggs. She gives birth, which is a great adaptation if you live in Hibernia, which is the country of constant winter. Cold, damp, wet. But if you incubate your eggs within yourself and then give birth, so they give birth to tiny little black lizards, lovely, lovely things. So that's unfortunate. And I'm sure there are other bogs around Templeport. I don't know if anybody seen a blizzard recently. No, not a newt, a lizard. No, right. Well, we may get out and look for them. So this is my major success of 23. I don't know if I've shown these slides recently, but damselflies, the wee versions of dragonflies, and there's a lot of different species. So the two in the middle are two different species, azure damselfly and variable damselfly. The one to the left is called Irish damselfly, largely because it doesn't occur in GB. It occurs in I think Scandinavia, and we're in the centre of where it occurs in Fermanagh, Leitrim, Monaghan, Tyrone, and I think a few down sort of towards East Galway, Laois, that kind of area. But it's got a peculiar distribution. The arrow is indicating how you tell them apart. So it's to do with this tiny little black mark where that arrow is, and that's how you can tell them. You see the other ones, if you go to the other species, slightly different pattern. So I was mega excited, as only I could be, of finding a wee blue damselfly at Tocher Lake, which is south of Ballyconnell. And these two gentlemen had come down from Belfast, and they had found no others in the whole of County Cavan, sadly. And they were getting samples for DNA analysis because the distribution is so peculiar. Why is it occurring in this Drumlin region and not in further south in Ireland, not over in GB? And then it's distributed. Now, my theory, of course, is it's to do with the Ice Age and that kind of thing, but they have to go out and prove it, so they'll do the genetic analysis. And so far, I haven't had the results, back from them. I don't know how long it's going to take them, but they've been doing this for several years, and sadly couldn't find anywhere else in the whole of County Cavan. So we've got something special here, so we need to look after it. We'll go on to the next one. And this is another bog specialist, a large heath butterfly. Looks very similar to some of the brown ones you get in the meadow. You get a thing called the meadow brown in the meadow. You get ringlets in sort of hedgerow, and you get a thing called the small heath in good quality semi-natural grasslands. But this one is a bog specialist. And again, our records are very patchy. The pink dot indicates where I found it in Fartram. It's also in Killywillen Bog. If I'm pronouncing that right, Paddy, if I pronounced it wrong, try help me. Killywilly, right, well, I'll get there. I'm quite sure it's probably in the bogs near here, but I haven't been out looking for them. Very short window to go and find it. You go and find it in May, June, and very early July. So if you don't, now last year we had a good window that time of the year, and I was able to get out. But that you won't get that in your hay meadows. You won't get that in your silage fields. You have to have bog, because the food plant is the hare's tail cotton grass. You know the wee white thing that you get in the bogs? That's the food plant. You won't find it in your ordinary fields. Next, please, slide, please. So there's Muggins, Killywilly, and what I literally did was walking across doing a transect, counting butterflies to my left, butterflies to my right, and that provides information when I send it down to the Biodiversity Data Centre about what we have. There's people doing that in Kildare, there's people doing that in Armagh. But we've got something special here and we should value it. Yeah, more insects. If you're fed up with insects, don't talk to me. I live and breathe insects. This is the dark tussock moth, and it's a nice caterpillar, bright yellow caterpillar, only found raised bogs. Again, until we went out looking for it, we didn't know it was there. It was there in Armagh, there down in the Midlands, but not here. And this is my own bee, Heather Colites, which is a solitary mining bee. And it feeds off the heather in August, and then I don't know if you understand about solitary bees, but you know the way a hive of bees has a queen and a drone that lay their eggs, and the workers look after them. With a solitary bee, just male, female, and the female provisions the nest, and off she goes. And so there's none of the caste structure with all the workers and that kind of thing. So this bee, again, you're only going to get it where you've got large amount of heather, like in heaths and bogs, that kind of thing. So, in order to promote the lowland bogs in County Cavan, not the blanket bogs, largely because I'm living down in Killashandra, and the bogs that we were interested in were largely in south of Ballyconnell in this area. And it's enough's enough, like, in the sense that if the communities up in West Cavan in the uplands, there'll be a different project that, you know, communities up there can develop. So largely I was interested in the lowland bogs. So this organisation was set up to promote the understanding of peatland areas, both in terms of the biodiversity, but also in terms of the culture and the archaeology. So we collected stories from people about what the bog was like in the past, because I may have very strong views about, but I have to be where people are, what people want to see, and it has to be, as I keep saying, it causes conflict when it's imposed from above, but if the ideas are brought in by people and they bring it to themselves, then it's much more likely to succeed. So the West Cavan Bogs wasn't set up by the government, it wasn't set up by Parks and Wildlife, it was set up by ordinary people that were interested in the area. So that's it. It's the other, if you can you see the thing at the very top? Community Wetlands Forum. That's a national organisation, again, to promote communities that are interested in wetlands, whether it's all the different things that we, marshes. Imagine all the names we have for bogs, marshes and swamps and fens and blanket bogs and Well, you've probably even more names. Locally, there's a bog near us called the Mash. How would you do you use the word mash? No? The mash, what's the definition of a mash? It's a marsh. It's a marsh. So there's another word. So there's of course, then there's always all the words in the Irish. But the bog, if you're driving from the Fartran Cross to Ballyconnell, the bog on the left, I've been told locally, is called the Flow Bog. And I was very interested in that word, because that word comes from the Ulster Scots, in the same, from the Norse. So in the same way as up near Shetland, there's areas called Scapa Flow. It's from just a big area of water or wet place. And so the names of things, there's so many different names that tell you about the history and the interpretation of things. So Flow Bog was probably a particularly wet bog. So that's me.
Thank you.
Thank you.